All right, everybody, welcome to, I believe this is episode number 7 of the John Wick Excommunicado podcast. Another special guest on this evening. Um, she goes by the name of SparkyPatriot. How you doing, sis?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. I was really excited to get you on here. I know I talked with you a few days ago about coming on here, and really you didn't hesitate at all, which I think is awesome. And the reason I wanted to get you to come on the podcast is because the voice that you have in social media, whether you realize it or not, I think it's impactful. And I think that you've got a lot of really good things to say. And I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be on. It's nice to hear you say that I have an impact. I hope that I do. That was never my goal. I mean, I jumped on social media for the politics, and to see that I'm not alone, that I'm not the only patriot living in the Northeast here in the United States. So it's great that, I have a voice, and I just keep sharing truth. I mean, that's what it's all about, right? To be fearless and keep sharing the truth.
When did you join Twitter specifically?
Probably around 2019, 2020, around there.
Now, have you
Just
always
to
had
see Trump.
have you always had the same account?
Yeah, I've always had the same account. I was a little skeptical at first to be on Twitter, just because of the profession that I'm in. But I wanted to go on it just to see what Trump was saying and what everybody else was saying. And so that's why I joined.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of a similar situation with me, but I obviously wanted to know what was going on from the man directly and not have to filter through all the BS. But
Yep.
with me specifically, I went after they took down my personal page of Facebook of 15 years. And
Wow.
they, not only that, but they shut down my Instagram at the same time. And they also shut down my patriotic clothing company that I had going on. So, that's, in the past, whatever. So Twitter has been awesome as far as connecting with people. And that's why I wanted to connect with you. And one of the things that I did want to ask you, and if it's okay, your dad, I believe, was in the Marine Corps.
He was in the Marines. Yes. He was an Ohio boy, born and raised all throughout Ohio. He was a preacher's boy. He was one of 4 kids. He was the oldest, and he went off to college. And when he graduated from college, he went with his buddies and drove across the country, and met up with one of their college buddies that was living outside of Los Angeles. And they decided, all 5 of them, to join the Marines and headed down to Camp Pendleton, where they served. And then he also served in the reserves as well. But my father was always a very patriotic person. As I said, he was a preacher's kid, and my grandfather was a preacher throughout the Midwest, and he witnessed a lot to veterans, and was helpful with veterans, and was a real go-getter and spending time with them. And so my dad always had that basic patriotic empathy towards anybody in the service. And so that's really why he wanted to join. And that's really where my passion comes from, is his passion. So it's just carried on down to the next generation.
Yeah. And I think that's awesome that you call that out, because, I'll just be completely honest. I really didn't know what it meant to be a true patriot until not too long ago. And Trump got into office, and he brought patriotism back. And I think on the flip side, he showed respect for military that I've never, ever, ever seen before in a president. I don't want to say ever, ever, but I'm saying in my lifetime.
Yes.
And I think and that was going to be my next question to you. Uh, Not necessarily currently. Well, I do want to say currently, but just in general, how like what's your opinion of how vets are treated overall, and kind of your take on that?
You go back to the Reagan days, and Reagan did a lot for veterans back then, but after his administration, things really took a turn, in my opinion. And veteran hospitals especially started to really suffer.
Yeah.
As an architect, I've gone into veterans hospitals, and the conditions have become, in the past 10 to 15 years, deplorable,
Yeah.
and an embarrassment. And a lot of it has to do with funding, and a lack of empathy, and a lack of sensitivity, and a lack of patriotism. And I think, a lot of that changed when Trump came on board. I mean, I have friends that are still serving today. A lot of them are serving overseas, and they saw the real difference when Trump came on board.
Yeah.
There was an excitement, for being in the service and still serving. There was an excitement with veterans as well.
Yeah.
You go to your local veterans hospital, you go to local veteran activities, and you participate, and you raise funding for veterans and help veterans. And there was a real change when Trump came on board. There was a real respect. And sadly, today, that's changed with the current administration.
Yeah. And it's funny, something you mentioned kind of made me think of something. I think I don't want to speak for people in the military, but I know enough people in the military that I can get a pretty good pulse on it, just like you can. And
Yeah.
I think that, before, when you went into the military, at the end of the day, no matter what, you're fighting for your country, for God and country,
Yeah,
period.
that's right.
But there was a shift to where not only did people want to fight for their country, but they wanted to fight for the freaking president of the United States. I mean,
That's right.
and then so I think the term, take take a round for somebody gave a whole new meaning. I mean, I would be
Yeah,
willing to put my life on the line for President Trump at the end of the day, and I've never been able to say that about a president before.
right. Agreed.
So I that's perfect the way that you mentioned that with the whole like shift in mindset and all that. And hopefully some things get figured out. And you can't, it's hard to stay positive when it's not someone in the office that you respected, or that you respect, or that you voted for. But at the end of the day, going back to what I said, I think we as patriots, we're here for our country at the end of the day. And that's it.
Yeah, and I mean, it goes beyond that. I mean, no matter who is the president,
Mhm.
you have to remember one thing, or a number of things, and that is our Constitution. And what is our Constitution based on? What are the words of the Constitution? I mean, just reading the words should inspire you on a daily basis to not just speak words, but put words into action.
Yeah.
No matter who the administration is, it's a personal goal for me that I don't just say the words, I do the actions, and every single day. And that's what keeps the positivity.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, all of us, if we banded together and we united together and we have the same passion, life is unstoppable. But when you have people that, turn around and they get down about things, it's easy to get down. There's no doubt, but you have to remember the long-term perspective and look ahead down the road and say to yourself, what do I stand for? What are my beliefs? And what is my passion?
Mhm.
You know, and it's okay to have more than one passion, but that's what keeps you going on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And that's a sign of leadership too.
Yeah, you're 100% right on that. I mean, you hit the nail on the head, and that's I was talking with a buddy of mine, and he basically put it into perspective for me. His name's Brandon. I work with him. Great guy. But he said, take all of your political beliefs out of the system right now, whether you're a left, right, conservative, liberal, I don't care what you are. If we all sat down and looked at the Constitution and went line by line and said, you know what, that sounds good. That sounds like a good value to have. I mean, I'm not saying it's the Ten Commandments, but it's pretty darn close. And you
Right.
take everything else out of it, and it's just good lively values to live by, and that's what pisses me off more than anything is the lefts. I hate to say it, but they're trying to rewrite the Constitution, and you can't do that.
Oh, and I think it's more than just rewriting it. I think they want to abolish it
Yeah.
completely because people don't know it. I mean, are we really taught and made to read the Constitution when we're in middle school or high school or college?
Nope.
No, we're really not. I mean, it's touched on. You know, I grew up in the 70s and the 80s. Our teachers were a lot different than they are today.
Mhm.
But the overall perspective, too, is, you know, it's not about the person that's running for presidency, it's about the platform. What is the platform between the left and the right? They're two very, very different platforms
Mhm.
and two very, very different belief systems. You know, and what it basically comes down to is if you have a belief system in your own life and you have a moral compass in your own life, you're going to select one side of the platform and you're going to despise the other side of the platform.
100%.
And that's really what you're seeing. I mean, more than ever before, you're really seeing that battle between good and evil. You know, not just left and right, but also, like I said, the platform.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And before, maybe there was some common ground before, and I think a lot of people forget the fact that JFK, one of the most prominent political figures out there, he was a Democrat at one point.
Yep, that he was.
And I was at the point at one point where I was independent, and which sounds better than Democrat. So I'll say independent at one point. I don't consider myself independent anymore, but I voted for someone I shouldn't have because
Yeah,
media told me to.
right. Yep. And that's the real key too. I mean, all of us grew up so differently, right? I learned at a young age um, the difference between the two parties. I had a father that was very informed. Didn't always, he read the paper every day, but he didn't always believe the paper every single day. But again, it all went back to that platform of morality. And a lot of people think that they have morality, but they really don't.
Yeah, yeah. It's being able to filter it, I guess, at the end of the day. The So one of the other questions I was kind of thinking of, I don't have these written down, but it was just kind of tossing around my head earlier today. Uh, you seem to be a somewhat big Second Amendment rights advocate. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I mean, look, when I was a kid, I learned how to shoot off a BB gun and that was the thing to do when we were kids down in the woods. Um, you know, shooting off the tin cans.
Oh yeah,
And as I said, my dad, you know, collected guns. He was in the Marines. And it's all about safety. You know, I've got family that are hunters. They live in rural areas where there's no grocery store, you know, close by. And they go hunting for their own meat, you know, for survival for the whole entire winter.
right.
So, yeah, am I a firm believer in the 2A? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad to hear that. I could tell you. I mean, I already knew that. It was kind of a rhetorical question. I knew you would be anyway, but I wanted to
Yeah.
kind of see your opinion of it real quick. But one of the last questions I'll ask you, and this kind of piggybacks onto the whole thing we just talked about with the Second Amendments. So we all know what just happened in Boulder, Colorado. It was a tragic
Yep.
event. I mean, I don't want anybody to get killed, period. But do you think that we are going to start seeing that narrative again? And like, what's your opinion of the whole? Because, like I said, I think it's tragic. I don't wish it upon anybody, but I hate to say it to be true, but I see the whole gun confiscation thing being pushed. I think tonight they were trying to push a ban on assault rifles. So, I mean, what's your take on that?
I mean, look, this summer, look at all the anarchy we saw this summer.
Mm,
It was unbelievable this summer. I mean, I'm not going to hold back and tell you that I wasn't staying up all night
yeah,
hearing sirens and explosions and screaming and everything else and sitting here, with protection, um, guarding my house. I mean, we even had a complete town blackout with street lights out,
mm,
everybody's house out, and a full moon. And it was dead silent, and off in the distance in the city, you could hear explosions,
right.
gunfire, sirens. And, when you think about that fear, um, and you think about what just happened in Colorado, is the narrative going to repeat? Yeah. I mean, there's always going to be criminals. There's always going to be bad people in the world. There's going to be bad people in every profession. There's going to be criminals everywhere, from rural to city to suburbs. No one wants to see this kind of stuff. No
Right.
one wants to be faced with that type of fear and those types of crimes. But at the end of the day, we're all supposed to be fearless, right?
Mm,
I mean, look, if you've got God in your life, you don't have any fear. You walk around with no fear. Why do you have no fear? Because you know where you're going if anything happens, if
yep.
you're killed,
Yep.
right? And so
You're
that's the perspective that you really keep.
you're exactly right. I mean, that's the armor of God. I try to live by that daily. Sometimes it's easier than others, but at the end of the day,
Yeah,
you're exactly right. Uh, if as long as you know where you stand with God, you should have no fear at the end of the day.
exactly. And that's where your accountability lies. Your accountability lies to Christ. It doesn't, it's not answerable to the government
Mhm.
or to your friends or to your family or to anybody else. Your accountability is to Him
Right.
and Him alone. So, as I said, what happened in Colorado, awful. I mean, somebody that does something like this has no moral compass.
Just pure evil.
They have no God in their life, because when you do, then you have morality, then you realize how precious life really is. And you don't commit such evil, heinous acts,
Yeah.
right? Because um, you've got Christ in your life. And so you have empathy and you have a heart and you value life
Yeah.
of all ages and all races.
Yeah. You're exactly right. Um, so one of the questions I like to end with whenever I have somebody on for the first time, I if you if you could go back to your 5-year-old self and tell yourself one thing, what would it be, if anything? And that'll be my last question.
Don't go into architecture.
All right.
either either serve in the military or do a trade. That's what I think I would tell my 5-year-old self.
Well, but you're kind of
So
doing a trade in a sense, and it's got to be pretty cool to see some of the architecture and things like that as a result of the hard work that you and your team have put in.
there are some times when, yes, it's rewarding, and then there are other times when it's not rewarding at all. It's a thankless profession.
Yeah.
And it's not highly regarded as much as people think. It's more highly regarded overseas in other countries, but not here in the United States. And really, the issue is also is that programs like, these housing shows have on the general consensus of why many of us went into the profession.
Yeah.
I mean, I went into the profession because I wanted to work on commercial buildings, because I wanted to help people. I wanted a better building, a better space, a better, better hospitals, better office buildings, better, country clubs and all that sort of thing. I mean, I work on a variety of commercial buildings, but a better experience for all ages and all types of people, but especially those that have disabilities that you can't see. And there are numerous disabilities that you can't see. And that was the main reason, really, why I went into architecture. But it's a thankless job.
Yeah, no, I mean,
unfortunately.
I like your output on it though, and I think that's a great reason to continue to push forward. And I know with any profession, it's got its ups and downs. But I do want to say, Sparky, you've got the voice. That's why I wanted you on here, and you're an amazing patriot. I know your family's proud, and I think you did an awesome job, and I appreciate you coming on.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. And hopefully you have me again.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate it, Sparky. All right.
All
Have a
right.
good one. All right. Bye.
Thank you too.